Okay, so folks, what is happening with Bitcoin right now? What is happening with the stock market? This is obviously a very important episode because we've just had, some big moves in stocks and in Bitcoin. And okay, so where are we right now? Now, what I've been saying is that for the last three videos, if you've been watching, I've pretty much been able to forecast what is actually happening. Although I didn't say it with 100% certainty, I mean, nobody could, but let's recap. Basically, if you want to know what's happening, this one from a month ago basically said we're in an inflationary peak, which means we'll have a big bounce in stocks and crypto. That was more like 5 weeks ago. And then basically 12 days ago, I said on the beach, I said, we're going to have a pullback with the SP500 and with Bitcoin, because SP500 was basically hitting the top of that rising channel. So this is where I was talking about, and then pull back. And in the latest video, which is this one, about uploaded 4 days ago, and it actually went to came out 2 days ago on here, made public 2 days ago, but actually came out 4 days ago to my Discord. What it said is basically that Bitcoin is likely to go to the 17 to 19K area. Okay, essentially what I was trying to say there is this. Let's see. Okay, and as always, these longer analysis videos I make go out to my Discord first, and after about 1 or 2 days, then I put it out for general viewing. So, YouTube usually says it's only being out for 2 days, but actually came out a day or two earlier than that, and thousands of people in my Discord saw it anyway. Okay, so here, this was the situation I was looking at. I said I'm expecting a higher bottom. In my last video, I was expecting from 4 days ago, I was expecting a higher bottom for SPY to come down and hit about the 393, 392 area. QQQ to hit the 299 area. I wasn't 100% certain, but I'm saying that's the scenario I'm expecting, a higher low, and then for it to bounce up, and then Bitcoin to basically probably make a double bottom. Now, I understand some of you didn't watch the previous two videos because of the last video, because picture got a little bit stuck because of I was sitting under the sun on a balcony and got overheated at the beach. So that's why I'm sitting indoors now today. So hopefully we shouldn't have the same problem. But what I'm trying to get at is this. The key I'm trying to show you guys is this picture. If you don't remember anything else, you don't want to watch anything else, just keep in mind of this one single picture. This one single chart tells you everything. This is obviously Bitcoin, right? And this green line is the SP500. Now, what do we notice here? This is very important. Bitcoin at 69K, started falling, right? It's been falling for more than a month, and SP500 made a new high, and SP500 only started falling in the new year, right? January the 3rd or something like that, but Bitcoin has been falling since November 10th, right? So Bitcoin's been falling for 6-7 weeks, and then SP500 started falling. But since then, they've been in lockstep, right? Lockstep, up and down, lockstep. And then, they both crashed here. But notice how the bottom for the green line, where SP500 is actually in mid-June. For SP500 is in mid-June. However, actually both bottom around mid-June. Okay, let me just double check on that. So the bottom for Bitcoin was June 18th. From memory, SP500 bottomed a little bit earlier, June 18th. Okay, it's roughly accurate to say, where Where's June 18th? 17, 21st. Okay, so we can roughly say they bottom roughly around the same time. Actually, if you look at this, these are the closes, right? The close of the market. So this is a very important chart. Just bear with me. Okay. If we look at the closing price of the chart, SP500 bottomed on the June 16th, June 17th, around there. Bitcoin didn't bottom if we use closing price to measure it. See here, around, what is that, July 1st, or even you could say July 11th. So it was about 2 weeks late in terms of the bounce. So by now, you've got SP500 already closing up much higher, right? Bitcoin still going sideways if we measure by the close, not by the extreme low, not by the extreme high. So if we measure by the closing price, SP500 actually went sideways. Bitcoin actually went sideways whilst SP500 went up. And see, even with this big drop, SP500 is still very much higher, whereas Bitcoin, it's made a small bounce and is now pulling back. Or let me change the chart so we get a better look at this. So if we, okay, so we use this chart. Now, this red and green, that's Bitcoin. So we now see Bitcoin actually kind of made a small bounce, right, in this rising channel and then has broken down. Whereas SP500, the green line, has just gone up a lot higher and pulled back now. So, and as we saw on the other chart, if we go by the closing price of Bitcoin, it actually didn't bottom till about July 11th or July 1st, whereas very obviously SP500 bottomed a lot earlier. So what I'm saying is this: all of the theory on the big bounce we're talking about so far is based on this video, right? In this video, I speak 1 month ago, like 5 weeks ago, I speak about the bottom of the market. Actually, in fact, we can probably click on it and just see we're saying in here that get rid of this thing, come on, that the market is bouncing because of peak inflation, something we call peak inflation here. So you can see here, right? When inflation peaks, this is in the 70s, 1970, 1974, 73, 1980, 81. When inflation peaks, right, this is SP500. SP500 tends to bottom and bounce, bottom and bounce, bottom and bounce. So we can see it here again. Oh, come on. Yeah, here we can see it here again. This is my previous video. The purple line is the inflation rate. When it peaks, SP500 bounces. When it peaks, SP500 bounces. When it peaks, SP500 bounces. This is all throughout the 70s. And it's easier to compare the 70s because that was a stagflationary period, like what we're having right now. But you know, the big problem is this. I thought that that basically Bitcoin would also bounce. And as you can see, Bitcoin did not make, it did bounce, but it wasn't as much of a bounce as the SP500. So it's been pretty weak. So the charts we're looking at from the 1970s are not Bitcoin charts. They're not even NASDAQ charts, because Bitcoin didn't exist back then and NASDAQ was not around back then in the 70s. What we were looking at was the SP500 chart. So in other words, to be safe, to be absolutely technically correct, when there's a peak inflation, we can expect, right? When there's a peaking inflation, we can expect the SP500 to make a big bounce. See, peaking inflation, we can expect the SP500 to make a big bounce. But we can only say probably Bitcoin will make a big bounce as well. Ethereum will make a big bounce as well, and Ethereum has. But we cannot say for certain that Bitcoin will make a big bounce because That chart I was pointing to in the 70s was about the SP500, and you can see SP500 made a very big bounce. But I have to say, Bitcoin made a reasonable bounce, small bounce you might even call it, from 35%, from 17.6K to about 25.2K, somewhere around there. So it's about a 35% bounce, and now it's turning down. So this is what I'm worried about. If you look at this, if you look at this chart, they've been, since the start of this year, they've been basically matching each other in going down, bouncing up, going down, bouncing up, going down. But then SP500 bounces, right? And Bitcoin doesn't make much of a bounce. So this is what I'm worried about. So what I'm saying is, yes, they are moving in tandem, right? But however, it looks like when the SP500 pumps, Bitcoin only makes a small pump or a small bounce. When the SP500 pulls back, Bitcoin makes a much bigger pullback. So what could happen is this. Imagine this. So what could happen is basically, my theory has been that, okay, SP500 would make a higher bottom. In my last week's video, I said the SP500 will make a higher bottom, right? Say around here, like say about 390 on the spider, 390, 392, because it's double kind of a old bottom here around 392, and we might get a shoulder, head, shoulder pattern, what we call inverse head and shoulders pattern, because it's peak inflation. I still believe it's peak inflation, so therefore the stock market, or SP500, bottomed on July 17, July 18th. That's what history tells us throughout the 1970s. So we think that would happen with Bitcoin as well. And Bitcoin did bottom here and make a reasonable bounce, like not too big, not too small, around here. But now obviously this rising channel has been broken. Doesn't matter how you draw it. You can draw it this way, or you can draw it connecting the bottoms through here. It's also been broken and confirmed. Either way you look at it, Bitcoin has broken down. And yes, it's true that we probably bottom for the stock market, which means it's going to make a higher low here at the 392 area and bounce up for the SP500. But we cannot say that for Bitcoin, because the charts from the 1970s don't show us what Bitcoin will do in a peak inflation situation. It shows us what the SP500 will do in peak inflation, but it doesn't show us what Bitcoin will do. So Bitcoin could actually possibly, like I said in my last video, make a double bottom here, go sideways, and then bounce up. Double bottom could be anywhere between, say, like 18.4, 18.5, to anywhere between, say, here, or slightly lower bottom, to 17.0, 16.8, somewhere in the low 18K to low 17K, even a high 16K area, and then bounce up. That's the situation I'm looking for. It's based on the fact that SP500 will make a higher bottom, it will not make a lower bottom and bounce up. That's what we're thinking will happen, because it's peak inflation. Now, of course, that's no guarantee. If we just look at the Bitcoin chart by itself, you could say that, hey, look, every time Bitcoin basically breaks down, like when it broke down here in this slightly rising channel, it crashed much lower in the rising channel. When it had this rising wedge, boom, it crashed much lower. When it had this rising channel, boom, crashed much lower. When it had this, sideways consolidation or bear flag, boom, crashed much lower. So the possibility is obviously open as well that the current rising channel or bear flag, whatever you want to call it, could lead to a much bigger crash to something like 12K, or even something like 12K or 13K, something like that, to that area. That's entirely possible. In fact, if you look at if you look at the past, every time it's crashed, it's gone much lower than the pattern, bear flag or consolidation pattern it was in before. So when this thing crashes, you think, boom, something like here, like 15 to 12K would make sense. If that was to happen, I think that would mean the SP500 would crash to a double bottom or new low. But I am not expecting SP500 to crash to a new bottom or new low. I'm thinking the spider does not come down to like 362 or even lower. I'm thinking it comes down to and gets stopped around the 392 or the 382 to 392 area, 382 to 392 area. So a higher bottom and then bounces up because it's peak inflation, inflation's falling fast, and it keeps going up. A big bounce, as I have been saying. That if that was to happen, then for Bitcoin, it would mean, as I said in my last video, a double bottom somewhere around the low 18K area, right, to 17K area, and then bounce up. Now, of course, nothing is 100%, so I keep open the possibility of Bitcoin doing what has done all this time, and which is basically, sideways consolidation, breakdown, sideways consolidation, breakdown, sideways consolidation, breakdown, sideways consolidation, breakdown, sideways consolidation, and if it breaks down like this, it could easily get below 15K to 12K area, somewhere around 12 to 15K. However, this time I think it's different. I don't think Bitcoin goes that much below 17K, maybe 16K, maybe 17, maybe around 18, and bounces up. I'm actually not thinking the 15 to 12K area for the next month or so because of what the SP500 will do. But eventually, as I always keep saying, eventually I think at the end of this bear market, I think at the end of this tightening cycle, when the Federal Reserve starts cutting rates again, starts lowering rates again, we will get to something like 12 to 15K, somewhere around there. I will update you guys as we get there. For now, basically I see two likely scenarios: the 17 to 18K area, provided SP500 stays in above its low, or in other words, if Spider makes a bounce at around the 382 to 392 area. Spider is the SP500 ETF. But if that theory doesn't work, that means there's no peak inflation. If it's not peak inflation, if inflation falls off very slowly, we'll get the CPI inflation report on September the 13th. If that doesn't, if we have a slowly falling inflation, last time was 8.5, say we'll get 8.5 again, or 8.4, 8.3, that's too slow. If that happens, then it is possible that SP500 takes out the bottom and goes below 362 on the spider, right? Again, if that happens, then I do think it is entirely possible Bitcoin goes to 12 to 15K when that happens. So keep those two scenarios in mind. Right now, I'm still looking for Bitcoin to make sort of a double bottom around the high 16K to 18K area. The key to watch is two things, as always. One, the US 10-year Treasury yield, right? This is what I called 2 videos ago. In the video I made about 10 days ago, 12 days ago, I said it would, when it was around here, I said probably bounce up. The US 10-year yield would bounce up, make a shoulder here, so we have a shoulder, head, shoulder pattern, and if it goes down, then yes, stocks and Bitcoin will bounce. So that's an entire possibility, and keep an eye on inflation. Will inflation surprise us and bounce back? So then you got to look at oil prices and that sort of stuff. Another thing to keep in mind is US 2-year, which means where does the market think United States interest rates are going to be in 2 years' time, in the next 2 years, and you can see it's at an old high. If it breaks through this 345-ish area and breaks up, then stocks will tank hard. Then Bitcoin will tank, and the US dollar is going to pop right through 109 and keep running to about at least 111. So keep those things in mind. I'll give you guys an update if I see anything changes. Until then, enjoy yourselves. I hope you guys are chilled, relaxed. Always be stacking some cash. I think some amazing, amazing buying opportunities, life-changing buying opportunities are coming. Have fun, guys. Cheers. Bye-bye.